Right, so what I'm going to share with you today, now that we've got all the hardware in the board, we're going to start prepping the board to be water ready. And one of the most fundamental requirements we have of an RC surfer is that our RC surfing dude is able to right itself when upside down in the surf. And that, I have to say, is most probably the most common question that I have when I'm surfing bro is how does he right himself? And really it's a pretty basic fundamental buoyancy theory. It's a two-stage process. I mean, the first stage, when the board's upside down, our bro RC surfer, being buoyant, has a desire to want to come through the first 90 degrees to the surface of the water. And if this was the situation now, we would have our bro coming up, lying on the surface of the water. And the problem comes in the next stage, because bro doesn't have the ability to lift himself outside in the air. And so what we need a rotation of the surfboard to complete that righting. Now, if the surfboard's too light, pretending my arm here is the water surface, if the surfboard's too light, the board's going to lie on its side with the bro resting on the water and the rail resting on the water surface like this, and the board's going to be stuck like that in the water. What we need is for the board to be able to sink down into the water so that the bro is bumped, and that the center line, you can imagine a center line running down this board here, and that the center line is tilted off center, allowing the part of the board now that's submerged in the water to have a desire to surface, and that's what rights the board. So the two things we need a bro that's buoyant, and then we also need our surfboard itself to be heavy enough to sink itself in the water to what I call the center line or the rotational axis. The board's got to be able to sink down to that middle line to allow the bro to tilt it off center and rotate itself up. If the board's too light, the board's just going to rest on the rail. So how do we work out what that weight requirement is? Well, fortunately for us, a whole lot of other people have worked out these theories. The buoyancy theory is quite a simple one. If you want to calculate the buoyancy of anything, you simply work out the volumetric size of it. That'll be its length, its width, and its thickness. You take that volume and you multiply that by the density of, in our case now, salt water, which is 1,050 kilograms. I mean, I know what the buoyancy capacity is of this surfboard. You'll see nowadays in modern surfboards, surfers often talk about the buoyancy capacity of the surfboard, or the literage, what liter surfboard that is, and really what they're saying is what is the volumetric size. So when I look at these boards, for instance, and I end up with a 4.6 liter buoyancy board, okay, now remember, we don't need the board to weigh 4.6 kilograms, a liter being equal to a kilogram in buoyancy terms. We only want it to sink down to the center line of the board. So in effect, this board needs to weigh a minimum of 2.3 kilograms. So that when it's righting itself, when the bro brings it around the first 90 degrees to complete that 180 degree rotation, we need the board to be able to sink halfway into the water, which will then help it complete the full rotation. So I need to make sure when this board is assembled that the board complete weighs 2.3 kilograms minimum, and if it doesn't, you need to add some weight to it. Otherwise it's not going to sink and it's not going to right itself. Right, so here I have the housing compartment. Got my battery, got my ESC, motor water jacket, drive shaft, coupling, got my steering servo in place, I've got my receiver. Pop the hatch on. Okay, so if you look at the overall weight of our board, our bro on, hatch on, running gear, hardware, we come down here, we're looking at 2.2 kilograms, which is about 100 grams short of where we want to be at 2.3 minimum weight. And what I like to do for good measure is just add a little bit more weight than what's required. So we can see here with the housing area, this is our motor housing area. This section over here, as I mentioned before, is our sponge well, our little water well, where we have water coming through this hole over here and being trapped in the sponge area. In this area over here, we have our motor coupling. This is the area where I like to now go in and with a mixture of epoxy and these lead pellets, the shotgun pellets, I like to add that in there. I'll add about 150 to 180 grams worth of weight in there to get the board up to about 2.4 kilograms, between 2.4 and 2.5 kilograms, just to ensure that the board has that ideal writing weight, that it can sink the board to its rotational axis, and that it's also heavy enough in the surf. So before we pour our mixture of lead pellets and epoxy into this well over here, just to show you that that area is ideally as close to the center of gravity of the board as possible, or in the center of the board, so that when the board's on the side, if the weight was too far back, the tail would want to drop down. If the weight was too forward, the nose would want to drop down. You want the board to be sinking down on its full rail length, so you want that added weight as focused as possible on the center of gravity. So there we have it in the situation here. We have it in the center, we have it as close to the center of our board as possible. We want to make sure as well that when we do this, that our motor coupling still got good clearance, so we're going to have that in place. We've got the end of the stuffing tube taped up, we don't have any resin going down there, and we've also got some plasticine around the stuffing tube, so we don't have any resin pouring back into the water well area just as we work in this area over here. So now we're going to go ahead and pour that mixture in there. So here I have a mixture of lead pellets wetted out with epoxy. I'm going to pour it into that motor coupling well. Just pour it in slowly, work it out evenly, make sure it's fitted in nicely, so your coupling can turn. There we have our lead pellets bathed in epoxy, setting in the lowest part of the pod to bring the board up to its ideal weight, and also obviously giving it a nice low center of gravity. So just to reiterate, to work out the buoyancy volume of your board, take the length times the breadth times the width. That'll give you your total volume of board. You multiply that by the water displacement value, which is in this case 1050 kilograms per cube, so it's multiplied by 1050, and that'll give you the literage of the board, and you want your board to weigh a minimum of half of that, so that your board can sink down on its rail to the center line to be able to rotate and right itself.